Hello and welcome to Accelerate Your ASM Journey. Today's webinar is sponsored by Palo Alto and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech and I'm excited to be your moderator for this especially timely presentation. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have 4 housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but that Q&A panel is also a good place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to learn more about Cortex Xpanse. So I encourage you to access that resource at any time during the presentation, and feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's presentation and demos. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Abhi, who's Product Marketing Manager for Cortex Xpanse at Palo Alto. And we also have Juliana, who's a Technical Marketing Engineer at Palo Alto. So I'm going to turn things over to the Palo Alto team.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Abhi. I'm a Product Marketing Manager for Cortex Xpanse. Today, we have our technical expert Juliana Sturma with us to discuss a little bit about the top 10 use cases for attack surface management. But before we do that, we need to talk a little bit about attack surface management. Why even worry about your attack surface? Well, over the past few years, remote work and the aggressive move to the cloud have scattered your critical IT infrastructure all across your environment. We're talking about dev environments, database storage systems, file transfer systems, and many others have been scattered throughout the globe. And what this has done is it has created really big challenges for your security team. They are held back by limited visibility. If you do not know all the different assets that you own, it's going to be extremely challenging to protect them. It is also extremely difficult for them to act on alerts because they're unable to identify which business units these belong to, who are these owners. And this is extremely pronounced when you have a new zero-day or a new CVE that's published. At this time, every second counts, and if you do not understand your exposure to this potential vulnerability, it's going to be extremely challenging to respond. Additionally, all of these makes it extremely difficult for them to prioritize risks that they need to remediate. And because of all of these challenges, your attackers have new opportunities. Our research indicates that extremely large organizations have one new serious exposure on the public internet every 12 hours. And if you look at attackers in 2022, against most published remote code exploits, they were beginning to scan for vulnerable assets within minutes. And if you look at some of the customers that we worked with, initially when Xpanse begins to work with these prospects, about 30 to 40% of their entire environment is unknown to them. As a consequence, you can see how these challenges for your security teams become extremely impossible to handle. So what can you do about this? Well, you can do one of two things. One, you can build an extremely manual inventory of all of your different assets, email all of your local teams and different business units to try and collate a single source of information for all of the different assets that you own. And you could also build out a program to ensure that if a new asset is created, you have centrally visibility into it. And if you manage to do all of these things, you then have the big problem of trying to prioritize these assets, figure out which one is a problem and which is okay to be exposed. Or you could simply use Xpanse, because Xpanse helps you automatically find and fix your exposures before attackers can exploit them. And Xpanse does this through 3 key capabilities. Number 1 is active discovery. Xpanse scans the global internet multiple times during the day, finds all of the different exposed assets that belong to your organization, And using our proprietary active learning technology, which is a machine learning algorithm that is supervised to accurately attribute all the different assets that we found on the public internet that specifically belong to your art. We go out into the internet, we find all the different assets out there. Active response module, we can automatically help you fix these exposures. Management, it needs to satisfy two key things. One is active discovery, and the two is active remediation. What I mean by active discovery is the ability, they're only offering you half a solution. They're discovering if they're able to discover and fix these exposures. However, like I said, if you want to deliver on the promise of attack surface management, and with the launch of our new active response module, we do just that. We automatically find all of your exposures and then automatically fix them for you. What this means is if you use one of those attack surface visibility tools that are available on the market, it takes your team anywhere about 4 to 5 hours to just do the initial investigation and then understand who this asset belongs to and what you need to do with it. However, with our active response module, because all of this is automated, we can do this in about 3 minutes. And if you look at the entire life cycle, we've worked with customers across different industries, and when we poll them on how much time it takes for them to find these exposures, find these owners, find these business units, and then fix them, it takes them anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks. And as we spoke about in the earlier slide, attackers are on a minute timeline, whereas defenders are on a week timeline. However, with our new active response module, we can bridge that gap. Using this new module, you can respond to your exposures in about under 5 minutes because it's completely automated. Now that we've seen how active attack surface management can help your organization, let's bring in our technical expert, Juliana, to talk about all the different ways customers are solving problems with Cortex Xpanse. Juliana, thank you so much for being here. One of the things I read on the internet was how bad actors are buying and selling RDP instances, which are then being compromised to deploy ransomware. Can attack surface management help with this at all?
Thanks, Abhi. That's a great question. So yes, we do see that RDP is one of the most common attack vectors for ransomware, and Xpanse helps with that. So if we take a look now at the Xpanse console and we dive into our incidents here, we can actually see that RDP servers is one of these incident types we found. And so because this is such a big problem, we've automatically started deploying a playbook, and the user can go in here and see these different options. And the first option here, automated remediation by restricting open ports, means that we can actually go back into this customer's AWS instance and restrict ports at the API level, taking that RDP server offline and within seconds remediating that issue.
That's incredible. So we cannot just find these RDP exposures that an organization might have on the public internet, but we can actually automatically deploy a playbook to take them offline. But when you look at it, a lot of these RDP instances are present in the cloud. And you and I both know that it's incredibly easy to deploy a cloud asset. All you need is a credit card and an email address. So how would somebody go about using attack surface management to essentially clamp down shadow IT or rogue IT in their environment?
Right, so shadow IT is another major use case for Xpanse. So here we are looking at the asset inventory of this organization. And what I've done is pulled up a list of all of the services here that are not hosted in AWS, Google, Azure, or on-prem. So let's say that the organization's policy allows for those four types of hosting. This will actually just pull up a list of any shadow IT that is outside of those hosted platforms.
That makes a lot of sense. You can essentially figure out how many of your services are running in a sanctioned provider versus an unsanctioned provider, and essentially bring those unsanctioned assets under management or take them off the internet. But what about when there is a new zero-day or a new CVE that's being published? We see organizations often scramble because they don't know if they have any exposure to this particular zero-day. Can ASM help in this in any way at all? And have you seen any examples of that?
Great question. So we see that security teams really struggle to respond quickly to 0 days. So in Xpanse, we have over 500 policies that we are continually updating based on new CVEs that are released and 0-day vulnerabilities. So here we are in the console looking at our attack surface rules, and you can see over here how frequently these are updated. So for example, this very recent VMware ESXi server, that was an exposure customers could use Xpanse to see if they had any of those exposures on their attack surface. We also had policies in place for Microsoft Exchange Server and Confluence before those high-profile CVEs even were released. And so this is a great way for customers and organizations to stay on top of new CVEs or zero-day vulnerabilities as they're released. And I'll show you too, we can then take a look at the network and see if you have any instances of those servers on your attack surface. And so here we see that this organization does in fact have a number of insecure Microsoft Exchange servers. And so this helps to kick off that triage process to investigate further.
That's incredible. So instead of emailing all of your teams at odd times in the night, you could just at the click of a button see if you have any exposure to these new 0 days. These policies, you said there are well over 500 different types of policies on the console. But let's say if there's a new 0 day, what happens then? Does the customer have to write their own policy? Does the Xpanse team build out a new policy? How does that work?
So we actually have a team of researchers that are constantly staying up to date with policies so that we can write new ones in and allow our customers to react to those. So in the attack surface rules, you can go in here, change the severity of one of these to mark it as critical, high, or low. You can also enable or disable here. And same thing in your incidents queue, you can go in and change the status. If it's under investigation, you can also change the assignee and assign it to yourself or someone else to get that process started.
That's awesome. One of the common questions we get from prospects is this a replacement for my vulnerability management program? Can you talk a little bit about, is this a replacement or is this something else?
Right, so vulnerability scanners are great, but they only look for your known assets. And so Xpanse helps discover everything that's unknown. Mm-hmm. And so for example, here we are in your asset inventory looking at all of your assets here. We see all different domains, certificates, different asset types that we've found attributed to your organization. And we can also find non-standard port usage. So that's another common way that attackers are finding exposures. And here we see an example where we can look at all of your services for HTTP servers and filter out standard ports of 80 and 443, for example, to pull up a list of those servers that might be misconfigured or might be more ripe for targeting.
Right, so basically traditional vulnerability scanners just fail when it comes to the cloud because they tend to be IP-based. And so with the Xpanse data, would they be able to use it in their VM scanner in some way?
Yes, so we provide that broader coverage and ROI because we do look for, we have more comprehensive discovery and can look at all cloud assets.
That's great. One of the most common ways we see attack surfaces growing or shadow IT in any organization is through mergers and acquisitions. And given that there's been an incredible amount of M&A activity in the market, can attack surface management help in wrangling this mergers and acquisitions input as it relates to a growing attack surface?
Right, so M&As bring up a lot of challenges for organizations because there are all of those historical assets that they might not know about, or maybe with ongoing acquisitions. And so with Xpanse, again, we help to find all of those and centralize visibility into your asset inventory. So for example, if you have a new subsidiary or a new, if you've just acquired a new company and you want to take a look at all of those assets that were previously managed under their ownership but are now attributed to your organization, we can go in here and apply this filter. Here, for example, we're looking at Acme Supply business unit, and this will filter down these results and pull up a list of assets that just belong to that business unit. So you can go in and further investigate those.
So all of this is completely automated. Let's say if we buy a company tomorrow, and if I want to know about their attack surface, Xpanse can map this particular business, and then you would see it within your console?
Yes, absolutely. We are continuously monitoring and able to pull in that data very quickly for you.
I can see that being extremely useful to security organizations that are struggling to basically integrate these new organizations under their existing security posture. So one of the other use cases that often come up is that some companies, even though they have an extremely good security posture, they tend to have really high cyber insurance premiums. Could attack surface management, in some sense, given that it helps them proactively manage risk and reduce risk, help bring down cyber insurance premiums?
Right, so those cyber insurance ratings are looking at your risk profile. And with Xpanse, we help you reduce that risk profile, fix your security blind spots. And so it's a great way for organizations to be able to lower those premiums. So if we go into the attack surface compliance dashboard, we can see NIST framework here and all of the results pulling up tied to that. And so, for example, access control, this organization has a extremely high number of alerts here, over 7,000. And with Xpander, we can help you bring that number down. And that's how you would take this information to your cyber insurance provider and refute your risk scores to bring your raise down.
That's incredible. So attack surface management doesn't just help you increase your ROI on your existing tool spend by being a complement to your VM program, but can also reduce your cyber insurance premium by helping you reduce overall risk. Now that is great. However, let's talk about a really bad incident, right? Let's talk about the time when you have to activate your cyber insurance premiums. Let's say there's an incident in your environment. Say you are breached and you do have to activate your cyber insurance premiums, right? Can Xpanse help with incident response in those scenarios?
Right, so we see a lot of organizations using Xpander to take a look back at incidences where they may have been breached and dig into what the cause of that was. So here we are seeing the incident management dashboard, and this shows you current incidents and incidents that are open. But if we go into your incident response and we take a look at incidents, we can filter by resolved, and this will pull up a list of incidents that have been resolved, and you can go into these, drill down, and look at source information, the assets, the underlying data here as well.
That would be extremely useful to security teams. Now, we've spoken a great deal about the breadth of different use cases that attack surface management can help with. We've spoken about, I think, roughly 6 or 7 different problems that we can solve. And we speak a lot in terms of finding these assets or exposures on the internet. But what about the content running on them? If they're insecure, can attack surface management potentially help identify what's running on them and if there's any issues with that particular content?
Yes, so this is a really powerful capability of Xpanse where we are now crawling website data, and so we can look at that content of your websites. And so I'll show you what that looks like if we go into our web ASM dashboard here. So this is a high-level overview of your server software, sites using HTTP, your top best practices that your websites are failing, as well as newly added web resources, third-party domains hosting linked code, and privacy-impacting packages your sites are using. So then we can also go and look into your websites under your asset inventory. So drilling into the content on your websites, we can take a look at one of these examples, and we see a screenshot with the timestamp here. We see that this website has failed a few important security best practices. And then we also run a search on technologies used, also do any form analysis of your HTML, third-party resources. So in the example of an e-commerce site that has a payment portal or a login page, you can see how this would be really valuable to make sure that there are no broken encryption methods there.
So I can see how this would be extremely beneficial, right? We are pinpointing areas in your network that are critical for revenue generation. If something is broken or insecure, as in the e-commerce example, we can identify that and then alert the appropriate team such that they can fix that particular exposure. We've spoken at length about all the different things that attack surface management can help you identify. You recently covered in depth about not just finding these different assets, but going into them and then figuring out what's running on them and if there are any insecurities in those. Is there any use case or a problem that attack surface management solves that you found surprising in your time working with all of these different customers?
So we've seen organizations facing challenges securing their OT or their operating technology systems. For example, with a hospital, if attackers get access to their building access control systems, it could cause major disruption, power outages, shut down that entire facility. And so we've seen that as an example with not just hospitals, but also power plants and other facilities. So for example, BACnet is one of the attack surface rules that we have in place, and we have a policy to help ensure compliance around that.
That's extremely terrifying to realize that there are these systems that were originally built without security in mind that are now exposed to the public internet, that in the hands of a bad actor, or when you think about some of the examples you gave in the case of power plants and energy grids, if a nation-state actor really wants to do some terrible thing, they could easily do that if an organization has a poorly misconfigured backnet server or any sort of building control management system. But if they had an attack surface management program, they can identify these exposures and potentially bring them under their existing security controls. So speaking about healthcare and oil and gas plants, these are some of the most heavily regulated industries. And so they all have to satisfy a certain level of compliance ratings to basically operate in a safe and secure manner for their customers. And so is there anything that attack surface management can do as it relates to helping these companies be compliant? Because I'm assuming having a critical building control system exposed to the public internet is not very compliant behavior.
Yeah, so we map your assets to these different compliance frameworks. So you see here we have NIST and CMMC, 4 different frameworks here that we help you ensure compliance with. And so this is a great way for you to stay up to date and make sure that you are compliant.
Right, so with basically a click of a button, an organization can find out if they're in violation with any of the compliance certifications that they possess. That's extremely helpful. So we've seen a lot of different problems that attack surface management can help with. And you worked with a great many customers across industries on their attack surface management program. Can you talk to us about some of the outcomes that an attack surface management program has driven for these customers?
So one example is working with a Fortune 100 healthcare company. They were experiencing cloud sprawl across 10 to 15 different providers that they didn't even know about. And so you can imagine the challenge this posed in giving them visibility into their different cloud providers and certificates and domains. And so working with us, we helped to reduce their issues by 70%. And we also overall saw a 14% decrease in their attack surface due to decommissioned assets. So really helped turn things around for them and help clean up their attack surface.
So basically helping them address some of the key challenges that we went over early on in this conversation. So what about the financial services industry? They are often targets of choice for bad actors. How are they using attack surface management?
So this particular company in financial services, they wanted to take a deeper look at their ransomware exposures. So we found that 77% of their assets were completely unknown to them. We also remediated 4,000 issues in just 3 months, including a number of RDP instances and also telnet servers.
77% of their network, so nearly 2/3 of their network they did not have visibility into. And with Xpanse, they were able to gain that visibility to bring all of these assets under management. That's incredible. Can you give us one more example of a customer outcome that you've seen once they adopted attack surface management?
Sure. So construction is another industry where we see a lot of challenges. With this particular customer, 14% of the exposures found in their cloud were unmanaged. And so we helped bring that under management for them. 51% of their public-facing assets in AWS were also unknown to the company, and they didn't have any Prisma Cloud coverage. So that's a really powerful integration that we have with Prisma Cloud to help bring those cloud assets under management. And we were able to help reduce the risk of a data breach for them and discover 28% of assets that they didn't know about.
That's awesome. One of the common themes that I see is that attack surface management doesn't just help one team in a security organization, but it helps them across their entire security operations center. We've spoken about how it helps vulnerability management. You have spoken about how it helps with cloud security management. So is attack surface management normally something that is mostly managed by one team, or do you see this sort of a tool that's being used by multiple teams within an organization's security initiative?
You hit on a great point there, and we see a lot of teams using Xpanse to manage their attack surface. Security teams, we have analysts all the way up to vulnerability management professionals and all the way up to CISOs who are looking at this data and reports and using it to help manage their attack surface.
Juliana, thank you so much for being here and walking us through all of the different problems that attack surface management can help us solve.
Thanks for having me.
Now that you know all of the different problems and use cases that can be solved with an attack surface management solution, you're wondering why choose Xpanse? Well, Xpanse protects the largest and the most attacked network in the world. The Department of Defense has chosen Xpanse to supercharge their attack surface management program. Additionally, if you're looking for an attack surface management solution, you need to make sure that your solution can do 2 very important things. And that is actively discover all of your exposed assets. And the second thing is actively resolve these exposures that it has now found. If you look at the market, many solutions that are out there do some form of discovery. But that is only part of the solution. Sometimes these solutions essentially push this data through an integration to some kind of ticketing platform. But the answer to resolving your attack surface risks does not lie in more IT tickets, it lies in automation. So with the active response module from Cortex Xpanse, you can automatically resolve these exposures on the public internet. Xpanse is also trusted by some of the world's largest and most demanding organizations. Like I said before, the Department of Defense, which comprises of 8% of the global internet, chooses Xpanse. Xpanse also protects all 6 branches of the US military. We also secure every US nuclear weapons lab. Additionally, some of the biggest financial organizations, banks, manufacturing companies, and others trust Xpanse to protect their attack surface. And we're also validated by your peers and the industry. In the inaugural GigaOM Attack Surface Management Evaluative Report, Xpanse was the only leader and outperformer. And if you go to Gartner Peer Insights, we are the most highly rated vendor on Gartner Peer Insights. You can read all about us from our customers who are actively using Cortex Xpanse to manage their attack surface. Thank you so much for joining us and learning about all the different ways attack surface management can help you proactively reduce risks. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit the link on the screen.
All right. Well, thanks to Abhi and Juliana for putting together a really informative presentation there. We really appreciate your time today. And a quick reminder to everyone, that link that flashed on the screen at the end there is still available in the handout section. So if you missed it there, you can grab that right now. All right. And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of our $250 Amazon gift card today is Jan Misamori from California. So congratulations to Jan Misamori. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Palo Alto for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.